Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for being on with us today live. My name is Malcolm Kerr. I'm a VP of Marketing here at Cystine, and it is my pleasure to introduce Henry Lee and Kyle Lint. Henry Lee currently works with both customers and prospects to scope out Cystine technologies through many different kinds of deployments, big customers, small customers, tons of industry experience. And Kyle Lint joins us from the technical account management side, where he is responsible also for helping plants configure new technology and making sure both implementations and scoping goes smoothly. Prior to Kyle's experience at Cystine, Kyle worked basically wearing every hat in a ready-mix facility, from driver to the IT side for dispatch, GPS tracking, and batch. So he's kind of seen it from both sides of the fence, making these two some of the most qualified folks imaginable to walk you through our content today. We'll be talking about from old to new, how to migrate your batch control system without missing a pour, how to make these transitions as smooth and painless as they can be. Some housekeeping before we jump into the content. You should see a little icon that says chat. You can enter in things in the Q&A, and we will address those towards the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I will pass the speaking baton to Henry and Kyle to run you through today's content. All right, take it away.
Thank you, Malcolm. Next slide, please. We're talking about migrations from the batching system, from the existing one to the new ones. But before we jump in and look at the migrations and what to look out for and what to avoid, let's talk about, some of the concerns or fear that the producer has when they do these kind of migrations. One of the concern, and these are all valid, real concerns. The first one that things come up is downtime risk. Every hour the batching system is offline, is revenue walking out the door. Missed pour, truck sitting idle, contractors calling, asking where the load is. That's a fear that the producer has, right? Not willing, not about whether the new system will work or not, but it's about what happened during the switch. The second concern that the producer has is data loss. Whether the, mixing things up with the old to the new, will all the mix designs migrate? Will all the system settings migrate from the old one to the new one? Will the material configurations that move from the old one to the new one? One of those things get wrong, you're not fixing just the data itself, but you'll be fixing concrete that is already in the truck. And the third, I think many people think that this is very, true too, which is a crew disruption, their operators. Your operators know the current systems inside out. He used it for the past 20, 30 years. He knows every little trick that the system has. And you're asking them now to relearn, right? You're fighting a learning curve, doing a live production schedule. They don't have time to fumble. They got concrete to pour. And if they cannot ship trucks, they're going to get phone calls from the supervisors, from the managers, from the customers. So, that's a situation that they don't want to be. The other part is the messy data anxiety. A lot of producers, because the system's been there for 20 years, they have a lot of data that's been put in through those period of times. They also acknowledge that their own data is a problem. They have years of workarounds. They have custom fields built into the systems. Are they going to be, will the new system be able to handle those, right? And things that has been patched together over time. How would that work with the new system? That this worry of disorganized to migrate cleanly, sometimes they prefer to just put it off, right, entirely. And the fourth one is in the integration. If your current system's integrating with dispatch solutions, right? They worry about that doing the migration, that integration will not function correctly. And they worry that the time that they start connections, that all the data is not going to flow back to the dispatch, or if the mix designs will not be flowing from the dispatch to the batch. So those are the things that they have to worry about, because if the integration doesn't work, it means that all the concrete that the plant shipped will not return the result and the tickets, and the back office people will not be able to have the correct invoices out, or the inventories is going to be off too. So all this are real risk. None of this, I don't know how you can avoid it, but I think with the right plan and the right guidance, the migration can be much smoother than what the producer expect. And that's a case that, we want to make today. Next slide. What we're going to cover today, there are 4 main bullet points in today's agenda. First one is cloud versus on-premise. So we choose that which is going to be our next solution. Basically, these are based on technology. There are 2 types. One is cloud-based, the other one is on-premise. The second part is migration planning. What are the things that we got to watch out for so we can minimize the downtime? The third is change management. How are you going to bring your team together and avoid most of the common mistakes, or, avoid disruptions? And number 4 are the field lessons. What worked, what didn't, and what can we do different from a real migration? Next, cloud versus on-premise. When we are looking at the next, the solution that we want to migrate to, these are the 2 main type of based on technology: cloud-based technologies and on-premise. This is not right or wrong. We're here to list the pros and cons of each one of them, so you can make intelligent decisions on your next migration. Cloud-based technologies, automatic update, always current. It means that the update of the software now is on the hand of the solution providers, not on your hand, that somebody will need to run to the plant and update the systems one by one. Cloud-based solutions can also give you access from any device anywhere. It means that you don't need to depend on, virtual private network. You don't need to depend on having to use third-party solutions for remote access, which is an additional piece of components that you have to keep up. And also cloud-based solutions, you're going to have a lower upfront hardware cost because everything's building into the SaaS model pricing. So you can easily migrate without high upfront investment. Also, the vendors, which is in this case, the solution provider, is going to help you manage the backups and the security. What does that mean? It means that you don't have to worry about whether the batchman at the end of the day or at the end of the week did a backup with the database. So when the PC fails, you can use those backups to restore the data at the point when you did the backup. Basically, on being on the cloud, all those data is going to back up automatically. And we also can, being on the cloud, we can also pre-populate data and pre-training. It means that, you don't have to wait until our technicians arrive on the site to fire up the systems, populate the data, and do the training. We can pre-populate the data and training ahead of time. That will give the user or the operator more time to play with the software, more time to key in the data that they need. And, it will make the entire transition much smoother. One of the things to watch out for on cloud-based technology is that it does require, reliable internet connectivity. The internet, it is required, but it's not a must. What does that mean? Means that the cloud-based solution will have stored local data. So when you choose, the solution that is run on the cloud, you want to make sure that the technologies also support a local functionality of the batching system when the internet goes down. Nobody can guarantee 100% that the internet will be up and running all the time. We can have all the safeties like backups, sell data or fire up your cell phones and share the hotspot. All those are viable backup solutions for today. But you also want to guarantee that, those, the 0.01% when the internet goes down, where you don't have a modem, where you don't have a cell hotspot, that your batching system can still be producing concrete. You can still ship trucks. So it is very important to be considered as part of the analysis. When we look at on-premise solutions, you have the controls over your environment. What does that mean? It means that you can't update the software whenever you want. It will operate 100% when the internet goes down. So some of the existing hardware doing the migration can be reused or transferred. But the thing is to maintain the internet connection, connectivities, or you're looking at VPNs for remote users, it does require higher IT maintenance. Basically, you will need to either have an internal IT department to support those, or you're going to have, a contractor IT to keep up with those. And also manual update. It means that you have to go to every plant, every system, and update the version of the software. It's very common that on the on-premise solutions where you're going to have a backup PC, but usually those backup PCs there. So when the PC goes down, on the production PC goes down, you can use the backup PC and then restore the database. So when you are updating the software, you also need to think about updating the software on the backup PC. So it's on the same version. So, and to avoid any database compatibility between the production units and the backup. So there's a lot of things to watch out for, but those are things that when you are comparing the cloud-based and on-premise will come up. Next slide. Okay, turn over to Kyle.
Yes. Yeah. So obviously when doing this, it's a good chance to audit your current system. You obviously want to make sure your mix designs are up to date. Maybe you haven't updated mix designs in a while. This is a perfect opportunity to get things back up to snuff before importing them into the new system. Check those integration configurations, the other things that you might have tied to the batch system. Make sure all that's documented. If you have a good set of schematics for the plant, how it was wired to the current system, it's a good opportunity to get that out. And, like Henry said, maybe this thing's been in place for 20, 30 years. I'm sure there are things that have been changed in the wiring in that amount of time, good chance to update the schematics. That way, when we have a person on site, have a good current set of schematics to go off of with any changes that might have been made since the previous system was installed. And also, label the wires ahead of time. You've seen the connectors and the cables that run from the plant to these J boxes. There's a lot of wires in there. Being able to have that labeled ahead of time, know what things are. Just makes the process that much quicker. Migration window, obviously you want to do that during low volume times. Sometimes we can do that on weekends and colder seasons. But it's also nice to have a little bit of work on the books so that the system is installed, that you have stuff to batch to get things dialed in. You don't really want to get it installed and then not have anything to do, and then down the road you're ready to fire the plant up and want to start using it, and you still need to dial it in. So it's nice to have some work, a little work available. Hopefully you have some other plants, maybe that during this time you can shuffle work around to make a window to get the install done, and have a little bit of work to do after the install to, like I said, get the thing dialed in. Validate data migration, spot check those recipes as mix designs. Make sure everything's good once we import them into the new system. Nothing worse than going to batch in a new system and the mix design is messed up and the customer needs the concrete. So yeah, just good chance to get in there, double check everything, make sure everything's good to go, and make sure everything's squared away before you start batching concrete. And also, as we said earlier, when we do the install, it's nice to have some concrete on the books that we can do after everything's complete. That way we have our technician on site, can help dial things in, get those jogs and feeds timed. That's another thing in the current system audit. You can, print out or take screenshots of your batch computer and see what those, jogs and feed times are in the current system. That way we can kind of set those as the base for the new system. And like I said, we can have a tech on site there. We'll have a tech on site during the install. So, you can get things dialed in with them. And also, after they leave, if you still need help, we want to make sure you know where the support tool is from right inside the batch system to get it our 24-hour support.
The data migration, I think, is a great point. Like I mentioned, if you are running, if you decide to go to the cloud-based batching system, right, you can actually have access to the software prior to the technician arrive on the job site. So it means that you can actually start putting in the data in the system and validate those data. You'll have more time because when the technician arrives on the job site, you have 4 or 5 days to finish the implementation, where the technician will have, all the hardware, the wires, the calibrations, and the trainings, and all the users, and then start populating data. Those data, right? We can, unless the operator already have experience with the batching system you're migrating to, they're not going to be able to populate all the data and validate them, right? Yeah. So, the cloud be able to help you with that.
Yeah. And also, if you're currently a concrete user coming into our batch system from something else, the nice thing about that, those mix designs are already in concrete and batch share the same database. So a lot of that work, like Henry said, you can do ahead of time, but also some of it's probably already been done if you're currently a concrete user.
That's a great point. Migration windows, right? When I think about migration windows, many customers want to do during the downtime, but especially the customers on the northern regions where it said, we want to shut our plant down between January and maybe early April, late March. We want to switch our systems during that time because that's when they do plant maintenance. But if you don't have, we're not saying that, don't do it during that period of time. But I think, if we're going to do it, then you have to plan ahead, right? So when your peak season comes, you're opening on the plant, you want to plan for, for maybe a day or a week before the big pour, and fire the system, fire the plant, and, and do some test loads and maybe do some fine tuning, right? To troubleshoot, because if you have not done any test batches, because during that downtime of the plant, it's not working, you better prepare for those times.
All right. So as the slide says, bring your team along, involve the plant operators in the testing. That way they can catch the issues before go live. Those are the guys that have been running the plant. They know the sounds the plant makes. when it's running. So if they hear something out of the ordinary after the install, maybe they can point our tech to the right thing, we need to look at. Train the new system before it goes live. Obviously, you don't want to just go into a big pour, batching for the first time, no idea how to do anything. So, our tech will be on site there during the install to do training as well, but also, have that champion there that can be the kind of maybe the trainer type of person for the rest of the company. There you go. The next check mark, an internal champion each plant location. Again, put someone in charge of that. Let them own the system. This is their baby to learn and get to learn it inside and out. You want to communicate the timeline clearly. Obviously, you don't want any surprise go live day. I'll try to have everything set and organized for when the tech shows up to do the install, but also when everything's done and you have those orders ready to batch after the system's complete. Just try to have a good plan, and that way, we're not having big surprises when we need to get concrete out the door. And have clear coordination with the different stakeholders. Obviously, you're going to need your scale calibration company there to calibrate the new system. Your admix supplier, they're the ones tying into the system with the bottles and feeds. And usually, most companies have a electrician that they use that's familiar with their plants. Make sure everybody's on the same schedule, knows when they need to be there, and just help everything go smoothly. You've got a column here of things to avoid. You don't want to assume the plant guy's just going to figure it out when it's go time. They may be familiar with the batch system they're currently running, but every system's different. I think ours is fairly easy to learn, but you don't want to figure that out on the go. You want to have some training ahead of time before it's go time. You really don't want to try to go live with multiple plants simultaneously. As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of nice if you can do this plant and have the neighboring plants maybe covering the workload for that plant. That way you don't have a whole area, kind of down at once trying to do multiple plant installs. Don't underestimate the learning curve of the new UI. Like I said, I believe our system's fairly easy to learn and figure out, but there's a learning curve to everything. Some systems name things differently. Free falls might be called that in our system. It could be called something else in another system, and maybe they're not used to that term. So, take time to learn the system and learn the terminology. Don't cut corners on the data validation. Obviously, you want to make sure those mix designs are dialed in and where they need to be. Again, there's nothing worse than testing out a new system and getting it going live, and all of a sudden the mix designs are bad. That's just going to cost everybody money. And obviously, we want to have 24/7 support there on site. Then also the ability for you guys to dial into support, if we're not around, at the time of go live, if the plant was installed, in the middle of winter and there was no word, we want to make sure before we leave, you guys know exactly where to go to dial in the support and do that right from inside the batch system. Anything else, Henry?
No, I mean, those are, do's and avoid, and you have more experience than anybody else since, as you work through your previous job experience and you have to do all this, right? So those are all valid points. Next slide. We want to share some real experience feedback that we got from ONG Industries on batch. I had the pleasure to work with them doing the digital transformation that they around 2020. So it's just a little bit prior to the COVID. They, ONG is located in Connecticut. They run 10 plant operations in that region in the Northeast. They wanted to move away from on-premise to a cloud-native solutions. So before they did the batch migrations, they implemented ConcreteGo and Delivery, which is our cloud-based dispatch and delivery management systems. They decided that migrating to batch is it aligns perfectly with their company strategy. One consolidated platform that can do batch and dispatch. What does that mean for people that not doesn't understand that? Between batch and concrete is one shared single database. So you're not dependent on most of the people knows or known for as Ulink, which is a CRM interface that's been built between the different dispatch providers and the batching providers, how to communicate between these two platforms. So very much the only information that can be shared between these two, between the dispatch and the batch are ticket informations. So very much you have silo data between the two. When Csign decided to do the batching on the cloud, the first thing you said, we do not want to be limited on by the Ulink of what information can be exchanged between these two platforms. So the best solution for us is to have everything in one single database. So you can avoid those kind of limitations. So having all the information in one single place, basically allowed the users to have, remote mix design control. What does that mean? We all know that Ulink can send mix designs between the dispatch and the batch, but Ulink cannot send raw material informations. It means that if you are adding maybe a sand or a stone or adding a new cement, somebody will have to remote log into the system, or you have to depend on your plant operator to create the materials in the batching system and putting all the configuration that needed. But, and that is because is silo data that's limited by what the Ulink can handle. While within batch and concrete, you can create those raw materials, and all you got to do is enable that to the plant. You can do all the configurations and creations of the new materials remotely without having to have the guys travel to each of the plant and to do that. And also automatic update, zero IT burden. From the CIO at the time when doing these projects, he said, look, we do not need to have a team that goes to every plant to upgrade the systems. Now with the being on the cloud, the batching software versions, they all align, they're all the same. They don't have to longer manage those on-premise software or PCs. And they can also have real-time plant visibility. Everybody can log in from any computer as long as the user has a permission. They can see what's going on at each of the plant, and more important, without interrupting the operation of it. Next. So before doing the evaluation and before you choose a migration partner, we feel that it is important to make sure that the partner you decide to go with has industry experience support, that the support team knows about the industry, knows about the software. So when you call, you're not reaching to someone that does not understand, right? That doesn't speak the same term as you are. You want to make sure that the system is built for the industry, for the ready mix. So sometimes you might choose a dispatch or a batching system that has not been designed for the industry, and you have a lot of workarounds to make sure that it fits the needs of what you're looking for. These always complicate things. So you want to choose the solution that is built for the ready mix. And you also need to look at the support. The support, I usually say that, your software is as good as your support team. Where's the support team at? How quick can they respond to your issues, right? And what kind of support you have? Whether can you just click of a button and it's going to link up to the support help desk? right? So because when the system is down or when you have a batching issue, it's not a small thing. It's a fire is burning, because it means that you cannot ship concrete, and that's a real problem. So you want to make sure that you choose the right support partner for you. Also, the has experience in these kind of migrations. How this company, what how many years have they been in the industry, the team that is behind it. So those are all valid points of that when you evaluate the team, take those into consideration. Next. All right. Kyle, I want to ask you a question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you've been, you know, worked in the ready mix for a good part of your professional years. I know that you told me that you drove trucks and you batch plants, and you manage your plants and the solutions. I would like you to share with the audience, you know, based on your past experience on system migrations, what to look up for. And if you want to point something out, maybe that you could have done it different. What are those things?
Yeah. I mean, I touched on a little bit of it earlier there. I mentioned it's nice to have some work on the books for when you do get the system installed. I remember one of our plants, we did a swap out on, we did it in the middle of winter. I'm in Iowa and it's cold in the winter, and that plant wasn't running. So good time to get it swapped out. And it was, it worked out. We didn't have to put customers off and try to shuffle work around to get it done. But, in the spring when it was time to fire the plant up, it would have been nice to have the tech on site while, like during the normal install, and have some loads to go out right there while the tech's on site, from Sistine. Just helps get things dialed in that much faster. Yeah, we can do it through online support and, the phone, things like that. But it sure is handy to have some loads to go while we're on site, just to get things dialed in. So, that was one of my big takeaways from that install. But, again, we were a Concrete Go customer when we did these. So as I also mentioned, it's kind of nice that the mix design stuff's kind of already sorted out ahead of time when you're coming from a concrete customer and installing this batch system. So, again, if you're coming from something else, really take that time, ahead of time to look at the mix designs, get things squared away, get them dialed in, get them validated, make sure they're up to snuff, and we'll get them imported and double check them again, make sure everything went right on the import. That way there's no hiccups when it's time to make money.
We're showing these plant cables. Can you tell us how important it is to get these right? Or
yeah, I've seen installs where the cable on the left is for a conical plant. I've seen sometimes that end will just get cut off and the while wired directly into the J box. If you have good schematics of the plant and know how that cable is wired up, there's probably been some changes over the years, but if you have that documented, you give us that information ahead of time, we can get the other end, the bottom middle cable there connector wired into the J box, and get a lot of that work done ahead of time. Maybe cut out the first half of the day of an install where typically just landing wires in a J box. If we have some of that information ahead of time, we can do a lot of that work before the system even ships to you.
I mean, those are great points, Kyle. We've seen people just cutting off the connectors or the wiring diagrams is not being updated, right? And they unplug it, taking the system off, that they don't know, what pin assignments those are for. So I think it's good when you're migrating, taking out the hardware before you take it off, update the wiring diagram. So that will make the switch very easy.
Yeah, hopefully when, it gets hooked up, obviously you're going to need to check rotations on belts and augers and things like that. But hopefully everything's pretty close. Like I said, it's just time's money, and the less that you all can be down during the install, the better.
Thank you, Kyle, for the advice. I think we want to leave some time for any Q&As. We still have another 8 minutes left. We want to make sure that fully utilize and your time, and we know that the audience might have some questions. So we'll turn it over to Malcolm.
All right. Well, Kyle, Henry, thank you both for running us through that content. Great to hear from folks that have actually done the work and seen where things can fall off from the ideal version of how this goes. The real world is often messier than we give it credit for in just slide decks, and everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? So appreciate you running through the kind of reality of it all. So I've got a few questions here. Number one, let's say, is a plant, they've been running the same batch system for 15 years. The mix designs are a mess. Some recipes have been modified so many times, nobody's even sure which version is current. How do you handle migration when the source data is so messy?
Let me answer that. From my past experience, these are doing the migration is a perfect timing to do some cleaning of your data. So the ideal is to, be able to export the data out of the system and do some cleaning and see where are the duplicates are and then eliminate those, and also do some housekeeping or maintenance that maybe mix designs is being in the system that never have not used it for 10 years. Why put into the new system, right? So it's a perfect timing to export those data, clean up, and we have methods that we can bring those in. So we can import those data into a system. If the batching system is connected to a dispatch, it means that the mixes will come from the dispatch. You can also, but we all know that they probably have mixes that have been created locally. That's also the time that you can export those systems, export the mixes in the old systems, and maybe save it, archive it, and then re-download the mixes from the dispatch, because that will be the more recent ones. So you're not importing, more, keeping all the old data they will not be using, right? Kyle, any?
No, yeah, that was right where I was going to go. It's a good time to just clean up those mix designs, get things where they need to be. And I'm sure there's, several mix designs that haven't been used in years that maybe they don't need imported. Just all around general housekeeping and can get back to where one of them.
Right on. So what happens if something goes wrong near your go live day? You're in the middle of a big commercial pour and the system goes down, and maybe folks on site aren't as used to troubleshooting it because it's new. Who do you call, and how quickly can you address those types of issues when you're doing a batch migration?
You take that, Henry. So yeah, I mean, if you're already live and the system's been running and, the technician's gone, obviously, dial into support right away from right inside the tool, or right inside the batch system. Get online with one of our support people. I would throw my phone number in the chat and say, hey, just give me a call. That way you're talking to someone instead of trying to type messages back and forth. Get them on the phone and work through the process. And this is cloud-based. They don't need, that's the word I'm looking for, a remote desktop connection to remote in and look at settings, check things out. They can log into the system through their browser just as you can. So again, the support's there 24 hours a day. Yeah, 24 hours a day. Just dial in and we'll be there.
Cool. All right, I think we can do one more and then wrap. So how long does a typical migration actually take from kind of signed contract all the way through to first pour on the new system? And then part two of that question is how much of that time actually requires plant managers to be actively involved?
Based on our experience of, we have done hundreds of these migrations. The whole migration will take 4 days, right? But the plan is going to be down for a day and a half, maybe a day to a day and a half. If all the wirings and Migrate properly labeled, and the prior of the technician arrives on the site, all those what we call pre-installation checklist is all done and ready, and for a technician to arrive, we average about 4 days. The plan again will be down for a day and a half. But there's a lot of things that are moving pieces around there. Is, you need to schedule your scale people to come in to do scale calibrations. You got to schedule your admixture people to come in to do the admixture calibrations. You got to schedule, you got to have your technician on site, your electrician on site. So when there's any issues, that electrician can respond and help. So those are the moving pieces that requires a lot of schedule and planning ahead of time. But we do have, our team has years of experience on doing these migrations, so we know what we're doing, and we go over those requirements with the customer when they signed the deal with us.
Wonderful. Kyle, anything to add to that before we wrap?
No, Henry hit the nail on the head there. I can't think of anything. He pretty much said everything that I had in mind.
Wonderful.
Get the scale company there. I will say, I've seen installs that by the end of the first day is, if we could have been calibrating, we probably could have test batched at the end of the first day, just that's how quick we got the wiring done. But so just as long as you keep to the schedule, make it go as quick as possible, get test loads out and get you back in production.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I'll wrap from here. Just wanted to say thank you for everyone that came and attended and listened in. Also want to say a big thank you to Henry and Kyle for taking time out of their busy days to be with us. I know Henry is coming from a hotel room, and so by any means necessary, we always get the job done. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. We will follow up via email with a recording of this, so if you want to circulate it with anyone else, go for it. If you are interested in considering a batch migration, we've got people standing by via phone, email, inbound form inquiry, however you'd like to get in touch. If we can be of service to you, please let us know. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great rest of the week. And thanks again for being here.